All right, all right, all right. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna, and I pray everybody's doing well. As you see in the title, this is going to be a deep dive. I just finished actually last night, and my voice is a little hoarse, but let's move through. I finished watching all 5 parts of the docu-series Dear Mama. Man, my voice is really hoarse. And essentially, I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts, and true to form, I just got to get it off my brain. And then, whoever receives them, receives them. There's many angles that we could come from this with. But to start, I think overall, the documentary was well put together. The transitions in a lot of the scenes were seamless. You saw that the directors understood the parallels between Tupac's life and his mother Afeni's life. And those that they brought in to share their thought processes added some elements to the story which were not as clear. Now, this is one person or one family who has a lot, who live their lives very publicly, right? So there's a lot of information, but it's in pieces depending on what you're looking at. And so because he and his mother were so very complex people, I think that you can be having discussions with other people and you can be passing them in the night because everybody's going to, in some way, somehow grab onto a part of the narrative that resonates with them. And then they're going to highlight those things, right? So I said that this was a deep dive because I am doing the same. And I submit in this discussion that the lens needs to be even more broader than Tupac and Afeni. And I spoke towards that a few days ago in the video regarding his father. Now, as someone who has done a lot of work in my family history, in the cycles that continue and repeat in our family history, in just reading about epigenetics and reading about trauma, really, in efforts to really solve or resolve my own personal issues, I come to the conversation from that point. I spoke many years about solonomics, and people may be like, "Well, what's that?" That's the way in which I'm looking at this discussion, and this is why when I hear and listen, I hear a lot of people give their feedback. I think they're missing that element. Hold on, Pac. Hold on.
Crazy stuff to him just to make sure his faith was straight, and that's how it was. It made me.
Let me put a pause here because I don't know why it is looping. So I don't even think that I'm going to play the Hulu series on here because, YouTube is weird. But I'm going to start from where I think many people are missing because that element is missing, which is the biggest void oftentimes that you heard him speak of, which is he didn't grow with his father. This is important, as I said the other day, because this is looking at and why is my screen stuck? One of the voids that can give the answer to a lot of the questions that people have. Why the person ended up the way they did. That missing piece is the piece of the puzzle that can bring clarity to the situation. Because again, this movie, this documentary was well done. But as someone, I'm like, wait a minute, nah. There's someone you should have spoken to more. And you only spoken, you spoke to him in passing, and he had a lot of the answers. The mother, Afeni, is being put to the forefront of the discussion. But here's what I found about doing this family research, right? Is that we attract characters, people into the storyline, into our familiar consciousness that resonate with someone who came before, that allows that situation or circumstance to repeat itself. Okay. And so Afeni is attracted into this narrative because there is something else going on in this lineage, right? So some of the things that I found out, and this is the deep dive part. That's I'm done with the overview. It was good. I would watch it. I'm gonna watch it probably again, see if I missed any things because I like to get thorough understanding. Right. That's just me personally. And again, I was for when I was in high school, I remember watching Juice and I remember watching Tupac. I didn't like his braggadociousness. I'm gonna be honest. I've said this before. When I was coming up and this was all happening real time, it was clear to see that he was out of control, right? And that people would say, well, he had so many different personalities. But before we get to all of that, right, to look at the person under the microscope, you have to draw back the lens and look at the environment in which the person was created. And then how that person, how that soul really reacted to that environment. Okay. So based on what the father is saying and what we learned from his aunt and his mother, and I think I'm gonna end up reading the book on this channel, the book that Jasmine Guy wrote. But essentially, what I have ascertained thus far is that, let me make sure my thing is playing. Hold on, because I can't seem to scroll up on the other side. Hold on a second. Hey, peace, everybody. What's going on? Queen to India, what's going on? I know I'm missing something over here. So based on what I was able to ascertain, I kind of like to go 2-3 generations back because they're already setting the tone. Okay. So what I was able to find is that Billy Garland's mother, Eloise, who everybody says looks like Tupac, or Tupac looks like her, okay, was born in 1930. This is what I was able to find with a quick search. And then we're going to get into the movie, why this is important. Tupac himself probably didn't notice. Afeni herself probably didn't notice. Why? Because they weren't in contact with the person who would know this. So we get a lot of Afeni's background, where she's coming from, but it takes two to tango, right? So that means when these two souls, when those 23 and 23 come together and give you that chromosome makeup, we have to understand that they're bequeathing something to him. Each from the accomplishments, the traumas, the fears, the hurts, all of the stuff, they come together and make this individual soul here. So his grandmother, what I found interesting was that she was born in 1930. Listen to the dates. This is why I think his life, this is me just coming from my experience of studying this stuff. His life is mirroring the grandmother's life. And I said this the other day. But when I watched this, I got more information. So that's what I'm going to share. The grandmother is in the 1935 census. Her and her sibling is on the census of her aunt, the grandmother's aunt. Why is she not on the census? When they go around and take census, who's living in the house? How old are these people that are living in the house? She's 5 years old on this census. And her parents are nowhere around. I think this is interesting. We don't know what transpired. We do know she was born in Fort Pierce, Florida. We don't know the situation why at a young, tender age of 5, your parents are not on the census. But it is an aunt. Keep in mind that Afeni, she has this codependent relationship with her sister, her older sister, Glow. Very interesting stuff, right? And she's also there reiterating a lot of what happened is this story because she was there. So Tupac's paternal grandmother, who he didn't know of, probably didn't even know of or remember, there's something going on with the parents where they're not wholly present. Now, when a parent is not present in this capacity, it creates a void. It also, in the early years of life, 0 to 7, 7 to 14, I've said this like 100 million times, it creates a deficit. And not only does it create a deficit, it creates a insecure attachment style. Because your parents, namely your mother in this time, is going to show you that or teach you that you are secure and that your needs can be met. Your father is going to be there to protect you, right? All of this is needed like a plant. All of this is needed for you to be firmly rooted in your earthly experience. If it does not occur, then you are going to see that the adult or the young adult or the adolescent creates these type of adaptions, some people call it maladaptions, to cope with the things that are not present. So the fact that we don't know what happened, but the fact that the parents, I would have to look more, but I got, the parents are not on the census and she's with the aunt at a very tender age, to me that's like, ooh, what went on here? Maybe the father would know, but he's the missing piece that, is not giving interviews, or people are not really looking into, because they're looking at the celebrity. Just like I did about R. Kelly many, many years ago. You can go look it up. When you step away from the celebrity, that's what blinds people's eye to the fact that this person is a human being who has human experiences, and how the people, because he was so able to expose and express his pain, the people, and it came to me last night, a lot of people say they love Tupac. No, a lot of people are trauma bonded to Tupac's experience. He had a lot of pain and trauma, and the people are connected through that trauma. And this is, I get ahead of myself, so I'll just say that. To me, it looks like a lot of trauma bonding, okay? Because you're bonding over trauma. That's what trauma bonding is. So the fact that the mother and the father of this young 5-year-old, which would be his grandmother, was not present, that is something that's going to be in the ether around this family. Go forward. According to the records, she marries in 1947. That would make her 17. So that means that there is a life-changing situation that happens at 17. Now, even back then, 17 kind of would have been young to marry. But a lot of young women married at a young age because of many reasons. Some wanted more security in their life. To my understanding, the grandfather was a little bit older than she was. And she married at 17. But according to Tupac's narrative, he also had a life-changing event that happened in 17 that he popularized in his song, Dear Mama. 17 years old, kicked out on the streets. So he had a life-altering situation happen at the age of 17, where he was on his own. When you leave from your house, wherever it may be, and you go marry at such a young age, there's so much that you don't know. But nonetheless, he and his paternal grandmother, Eloise, have something that's happening at 17. But even before then, he has something that's happening at 5. He has something that's happening at 3. He has something that's happening at 7, right? Where there is a question of a lack of resources. In addition to according to his father says he saw him when he was younger and then lost touch around the same age, right? So we see a parental wound re-injuring the soul at around the same time. In addition, his mother is struggling financially. And he's seeing different men who are stepping into this father role, but he's not fully making this connection, okay? So there's some similarities. The parallel in Dear Mama is giving us what is seen, but it's the unseen that may have been plaguing him, where he's hearing voices and he's feeling dark energy around him, and he isn't settled. So he becomes what he feels the people want to see. This is why people I think he had multiple personalities. Some people said that he becomes, because when you have an insecure attachment style or an anxious attachment style, remember, he didn't get it in the 0 to 7, 7 to 14, then he's afraid of being abandoned. Okay, let me know if I could still be heard. People, and we're using Tupac, and I sometimes, that's a contradiction. I sometimes use celebrity to have these conversations because people seem to be more vested in seeing it. And maybe if you can see it in them and see them as human, then you can see it in yourself and the stories around you and do the work that you really need to be doing, which is on your own stuff. And the reason I'm able to share this here is because I've done it for myself, right? I can't say that enough. So I'm trying to see if this thing is live, because my computer is My computer is feeling glitchy. Let me know if I can still be heard. Hold on. We the people, we like braggadocious. We like over the top. We like that kind of stuff. And people say, well, he was so intelligent. He was so this, he was so that. He didn't need to do that. You wouldn't have heard him had he not been or become what the people want, right? Because the people want, even if you're not sure about what you're doing, they want you to pretend like you are. And if you're not fully rooted and grounded because of the things that happened before time, you are going to give into that and along the way lose yourself. And this causes this dichotomy in the mind, and it causes this angst in the soul. Like the soul is troubled, right? And you can see, if you are willing to step away from the conversation and the celebrity of the situation, you can see that this soul was troubled. You can see that the soul had suicide idealizations. You can see that the soul was obsessed with death. You can see that the soul was idealized things, but when it came to the practicality of it, the soul had not yet learned to govern itself. And it is in that back and forth, that up and down, that drama, the people not only look at it as a spectator, look at it as look at him, and kind of to a certain degree, even in his humanity, he becomes dehumanized, right? Because he's an object of this entertainment for the people. That's a dangerous place to be. Anywho, the parallels, before we get to Dear Mama, before we get to the Panther and how his life mirrors a lot of what his mother went through, the missing piece, like I keep saying, is very important. Hold on, peoples. Because my thing is stuck at the top. I don't want to mess with this. I think it's good, so I'm going to keep going. I'm trying to find it on. Hold on one second. Because sometimes I'll be talking to myself, but I don't need to go live on YouTube to talk to myself, right? Let me release this screen and then grab the screen again. Just to, oh yeah. All right, we good. So I was going to release it, but I don't have to. So the grandmother, there's something coming from even his grandfather, on his paternal grandfather. There's something coming down that line, the part that we don't know, the part that he didn't know. The grandmother has 4 children by the time she's 26. According to the narrative, she marries at 17. And by 26, all of these are very important dates because by 25, he has no children and he dies. And by 26, according to Billy Garland, his paternal father, his mother dies of illegal abortion. I said the other day, that didn't miss me. That means 3 souls perished simultaneously. So that means not only do you have trauma, you have loss. You have a sudden ejection of a soul from a body. You have a fear. You have all of these things in this familiar line that is going to reemerge somewhere. Okay? And you also have a re-injuring of a young man, 6 years old, which is his father, who loses his mother. So far, you have unexplained why the mother at 5 is on the census of her aunt and her parents are nowhere around. You have Billy Garland, which would be the next in the generation. He loses his mother at 6 years old. And then you have a lot of consternation in the life of Tupac Shakur at a young age. You also have Afeni Shakur, who's energetically on the same vibration because she has issues within her family as it relates to her father. And you have her mother trying to get away from abuse. So that would indicate that they have some trauma in their family lineage, and she moves away. So at this time, you have to say that people are having some, and according to this Dear Mama documentary, her thoughts is that Tupac was a miracle birth because she was not able to carry past 3 months. According to her, she would have miscarriages beyond the 3 month mark. Good. Not good, but just when I say good, I mean, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Okay. So this particular soul, before we can get to this soul, I questioned, wait a minute, if the story with the Black Panther and I'm like, how did she get pregnant if she was in jail? So shout out to the directors. Y'all did an excellent job because y'all told the story and it filled in some places. So let's fill some in, right? Sorry, hold on. Teaching the children got my vocals. Okay, so what I've established so far, according to what's left on record, is that so far we have 3 generations of injury in a certain area. Injury around, and it possibly may also be because I don't know what the impetus was for the mother to seek out an abortion. It could have been economically driven. We do see a reoccurring theme of lack of resources in the life of Afeni, in the life of Tupac. I don't know how much Billy Garland faced this. I do see in the interviews he speaks about money in passing, that I can tell that there was something there, but I don't have enough to go on. So we're going to say definitely resources play a part in the choices that they make. So much so, I don't want to jump ahead because y'all know how I do. So let me just keep going. His mother dedicates her life to the Black Panther movement, okay, starting in 1968. Resources, again, she wanted to enroll. She did enroll for a semester in the performing arts when her mother moved she and her sister to Harlem. She didn't feel that she was on par, according to the sister, with the European and the other. She didn't think that there was an equitable distribution of resources, and that basically she couldn't compete economically. So she threw herself into education, right? That she would make something of herself as it related to intellect to allow herself to stand out. Since in her mind, possibly, she said, according to the sister, they called them black bees. They called them all of these names, even people from the neighborhood. So this would have created a self-consciousness within the person, even if they didn't express it, right? So you look for an outlet and an avenue in which you can express yourself, which is in the arts and education. This is where the Dear Mama documentary is showing the parallels between she and her son, because he comes and does the same thing. The mother, 68 is when, a lot of stuff is going on. Malcolm, Martin, civil rights, peace, that's not working. So the children of those people come and decide, we're going to find another way. They're going to take matters into their own hands. She moves towards the forefront of this movement. Okay. She is in high command in Harlem, which would get her the respect that she is looking for. As a January woman, is a Cap. She's a Capricorn. So she's going to be looking for certain things, right? Naturally, intrinsically. And naturally, there's a leader quality too. If you have a level of balance, there's a leader quality in it. So she throws herself, he's not born yet. Because I'm like, well, how did Billy Garland come into this? So let's stick with the situation, right? According to the narrative, because when he was giving the interview on the Art of Dialogue, he was being a little elusive. And I'm thinking to myself, I think he's talking about Afeni, but he keeps saying, I don't want to bad talk anybody. And I'm like thinking to myself, nah. Something is not adding up here, right? Something is not adding up here. So in this film, the sister adds in the missing pieces. The Panthers, COINTELPRO, they infiltrate the New York 21. They go to prison. She decides that she's going to defend herself. We've probably heard this story. And I think I'm going to read the book because I'm intrigued, right? But I think when we're trying to, for our own lives, when we are trying to understand why are we thus, and I think a lot of Tupac's struggle is trying to understand what and how he's feeling what he's feeling, but he doesn't have all of the information. And oftentimes we don't. We have to go searching for it, right? But if you don't go searching for it and you only make do with what you've been told, gaps are going to come in the story. Anywho, they go to jail. She decides to defend herself, and they have $100,000 bond on all of the people in jail. And they decide that the first bond that they raise, they are going to bond her out because she's going to defend herself. And they have a fighting chance of getting off of all of the charges. It is during this time, because I was like, wait a minute, where's the gap in the timeline? According to the narrative, it is during this time that she meets someone from the Jersey chapter, which is Billy Garland. Now, today, when he's presenting himself, I think he has a lot to share, but we also have to consider a few things. When he's presenting himself and having these discussions, it's someone who historically has been left out of the narrative. And he's also an August man, which is August the 5th, right? Which, being, let's just say, they don't always like being left out the narrative. I have some personal experience, okay? So, it is also important to note that Afeni is born in 1947, right? According to the information. Billy Garland is born in 1949. That would mean that Afeni is older than him. I find it important to note that on the Art of Dialogue, and you can watch it, when asked about Assata Shakur, he goes into, I don't want to say fanboy because that's disrespectful, but he transports back to 1968, 9, when he's this young guy, and you could see it in his face, like, oh my goodness, she was fly. Assata Shakur is the political, she's in political exile in Cuba, right? That whole situation. But when he speaks of Afeni, you don't see that same reminiscent way. But I'm thinking to myself, when someone comes together, what would pull them together, even if for a moment? All of this is important because some people were born from that moment. And so some of the feelings that you feel, some of the unexplained emotions are coming from the way in which you conceived. We're talking about a rapper. When he's in his feelings, you may get Dear Mama. When he's mad that somebody shot him up and nobody's talking, you may get Who Shot You. Depending on the mood and the experience and the emotions, you're going to get a different song. So how you were conceived is basically the soundtrack. What was happening in and around, like Marvin Gaye, what's going on, you wouldn't understand where Marvin Gaye was mentally and emotionally unless you understood what was going on in America at that time. So when I look at family history, when I look at healing, when I look at trauma, I don't just look at what everybody else is looking at. Because for me, historically, that hasn't given me understanding. What gives me understanding is when you first broaden the scope, and then you narrow the scope, and then you broaden the scope, and then you narrow the scope. So all of this I'm giving you is backstory. For those who don't know, I'm also an author. So click the link if you want to learn more about soul therapy books and more information. So I've gone through this process time and time again. Okay. So when you broaden the scope, which is what I'm doing, it's not just like, ooh, it's tasty morsels and details that, ooh, it's saucy. No, it's giving you an understanding, if you even care about the story, about why the person was the way the person was. So you have all of the backstory, the unseen, the spiritual, the stuff that's in the cloud, the stuff that's waiting to be downloaded. You have all of that stuff. The family ancestral stuff is sitting in the cloud, like you have Google Docs, or you have all of this stuff, Apple, whatever. It's all in the cloud. It's not on a physical disk anymore like it used to be back in the days, or a floppy drive, or what do you call it? The flash drive. When I first started getting on computers, it was a floppy disk. Remember them floppy disks? And then it was the smaller disk. And then it was the flash drive. No, and then it was a regular, like a disk. And then it was a flash drive. And now you don't even see it, but it's there in the cloud. That's how our good, bad, and indifferent of our familiar line is in the cloud. And whoever has that password can access it. And the password is energetic vibration The frequency in which you operate on, the frequency of that soul accesses the good, the bad, and ugly of the things that are in that cloud. So we are a composite, not just what happens between our parents, but what happened before our parents. India says she doesn't trust the cloud, but it's there, sis. I feel you, but it's there. That's how it is spiritually. It's there. For them to have that concept of there being a place that we cannot see, but it stores data, is the same. It's spiritual. The cloud is a spiritual concept in means of you can access something that you can't see, but it's there in full. So it is with our makeup as human beings, these soul, spirit, and body, triune beings, whatever you want to call it. We have aspects of us that we can see and aspects of us that we can't see. So his mother is the face at this time of this big controversial movement. All eyes on me, all eyes was on her. Okay. And she's out and charged with, according to the narrative, raising funds to exonerate the 21 that's in. Now, the funds that they're raising, remember this East Coast, West Coast thing, is the Panthers had a West Coast chapter where it started and it made its way to the East Coast. So essentially, Tupac comes and picks up in a space because according to the narrative, there became a beef between East Coast and West Coast Panthers. Okay. There was a beef because the monies that they were raising to exonerate those who were in jail here, they were taking it and reallocating it to people on the other coast, which caused problems. And the people who were still in jail thought that some underhanded stuff that was going on, and the person who they allowed to go out to do their work wasn't doing what she was supposed to do. Okay, this is what they thought. What I found interesting, and I said I was going to make this another video. I probably will, but I will just put it here so we could just stick a pin for another time. The Lumumba Shakur man, who, if you look up the Wikipedia, says she was married. According to her sister, her oldest sister, she, Afeni, entered into poly, in which she was going to be the second wife. I found that intriguing, but I'm not going to get stuck on that point right now, right? But when she goes to jail, I guess, that they said that she and him, because they were both leaders in this organization, they kind of had a power struggle. So while the original man is still in jail and whatever is falling apart in that relationship, the driver, because all Billy is talking, he didn't tell us this. I don't remember him telling us this, but this documentary tells us this. He's younger than her by 2 years. He also has a mother wound. You see this strong, independent, determined, melanated woman, right? Who's pushing forward in this very motherly way, taking care of, looking out for, distributing aid and fighting for the cause of the oppressed. You see her. And in that light, in that way, you are charged, according to the conversation, with being her driver. He's younger than her, according to the story, by 2 years. He didn't tell us that part. And he's the driver who's responsible for transporting her to and fro from the courthouse. That's what the storyline was. I said, this is fascinating and a good little interesting detail, okay? That he is the driver. And he's still alive, Most High bless his soul, so he can come and, tell us if it's true or not. He said something on the Art of Dialogue and repeated it again, that at that time in the movement, people had to get rid of urges, he called them. So he did his best to minimize the interaction that he had with Afeni. Right? He says it wasn't any flowers and it wasn't any romance. And it was just basically a base human need. Because people thought they were going to go to jail and people thought they were going to die. So look at the context. She's not here. I don't know if she wrote about it in her book, but the context from which he's saying that he wrote this song, which is now they wrote this song, which became Tupac, right? Was on just base needs. There wasn't any love there. The possibility that he comes in the earth feeling this void could be that. Now I don't know how much he's like trying to downplay it, but based on what the man said, this is the way in which he's conceived. Okay. And that she is aware that it is not the other guy, but that it is in fact Billy Garland. And for whatever reason, remember, she also has a what? Father wound. So rejection from a male, right, who you now not only have conceived for, but have gone beyond the point where you historically have lost your child, right, would be something that you may not take so lightly. Because not only are you pregnant, which you have all of these different hormones, and you're going through a trial for your life and 20 of your other comrades, but you also are being rejected by someone who you conceived with. All very interesting, because all of this downloads into Tupac, according to what we see. Because what we see is the revealed things, right? We see the plant, but we didn't see the roots. And it's overshadowed by all of her work, all of her political efforts, all of the it's over if it's overshadowed, all we're seeing is the result. So fast forward, according to him, the up to the age of 3, he still comes around and he still sees him, not as much as he wants to, because they're in Jersey City and they're in Harlem. Now the Panthers fall apart. And it appears, based on the way he says it, he doesn't directly say it, but he says that people start to go their own way, and he was one of them. To me, that translated, he pulled out of the movement. He could correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what it sounded like to me. She doesn't seem like she totally pulled away from activism, right? She started advocating for people in other spaces, but he marries. He says she may have gotten upset that he married another woman named Carol. This is what he said. There was a double XL article. Let me see if I can get that article that he gave, I think, many years ago. And in there, he was a little more candid. It was kind of like when he's now saying that, hey, I am Tupac's father, and Afeni is the one who's getting all of Afeni's getting all of the accolades. She's getting all of the attention, right? I told you he's an August man. Okay. Afeni's getting all of the attention. And yeah, even though I was not there. So when people saw it, they're like, you just came out of nowhere. But there's a possibility, we don't know, in the transition that they do lose contact, or she doesn't want any contact with him. We don't know. I don't know. It may be written in the book. I don't know. Okay. I'm going to have to read that book. But he basically is coming to say, you know what? He became something, and that's what people looked at it as. He became something, and now you want to claim that you're his father. But again, either which way, this is the part that to me could have explained a lot of what Tupac was experiencing. So his conception, according to what the father is saying, wasn't what, it wasn't where he wanted to be with her. And therefore, he dealt with it as it was. And then he proceeded to have 5 other children, right? I don't know if he got married, but he has 5 other children. I'm going to read a little bit from this double XL. Because I think it's important that some of this information came out then. And there's so much that has been said that possibly, we forgot, or I wasn't paying attention. But again, when you're going through your own family history, like the way in which the aunt is able to tell so much about what transpired, shout out to everybody who just joined us, the way in which the aunt is able to share, it's the same way you had aunts who were there, uncles who were there, grandparents who would have heard information. When you collect the data in the same way they collected the data in this documentary, that's how you'll be able to start to put the pieces together. So when I'm hearing what everybody's saying, I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? How come it's not sharing my screen? The screen is, I don't know, it's not sharing. Anywho, let's read a little bit about what he thought. Um, he didn't know his real father, right? He thought his father was dead all my life. So thinking someone is dead, I want you guys to see this. Let me. Thinking somebody is dead can really mess up your mind because in a lot of his interviews and a lot of his songs, that void is to the forefront. Death, number one, right? Based on what happened before he even knew, based on what's happening in and around him, but death. Um, but why is my thing freezing up? Before you can really conceptualize death, yo, my thing is they throwing off my thought process, peoples. You know I gotta get this all out. He thought his father was dead because he thought someone else was his father. So he kind of was thrown off the case, if you will. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Why do I see? Hold on. And I can't even see my screen. Let me stop sharing so I can see my screen. My bad. I don't know. It was looping. Okay, I'm back now. Let me know if you can hear me. So essentially, we're gonna look at. I was trying to share the screen and then it started bugging out. But essentially, we're up to the part where he's conceived according to the father, because the father's thoughts. I think to me, and the father's alive, so I say this with respect. Seeing how she's honored, like when you're in an organization, right? Especially in this type of revolutionary space, the closer in proximity you are to the leaders, especially as a younger person, it makes you feel like, yo, I'm doing something. So his proximity and them charging him, according to the narrative, with transporting her would have given him this inroads, this access to power, by way of Afeni Shakur, because let's not make no mistake about it. According to the narrative, at this time, she is the head figure because Lumumba is in jail and she's the spokesperson. She's out here speaking to the cameras. She's out here raising money, and she's out here still trying to galvanize the people with the help of those who were still around. Okay, so his proximity to her, she's not at this time really trying to steal his shine. I have to say it in this way, and I don't mean any disrespect, only because the way in which the story is told, it makes it seem like something else, right? So I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all. But if we look at it for what it is, he's the younger person who's now charged with helping her to accomplish something that is bigger. That's what I'm seeing, right? Respectfully. So to diminish that and be like, oh, it's just we just needed to, get off our lusts, so to say. I think that reflects on what that soul who already is carrying all of this baggage would feel when that soul comes in. So essentially, he marries somebody else, and that's what I was in the midst of doing, sharing this double XL magazine, right? Because they interviewed him Why does it keep popping it up? Oh, hold on. Because he thinks his father is deceased, which does something to, and being that he would have been, this is my theory, people, tapped in just the same way we are to someone else's emotions and someone else's experience, especially when those experiences have not been, that energy has not been relieved, you feel things more intensely. So you're not only just feeling the absence of your father, you're feeling the absence of your father's mother, you're feeling the absence and loss of your grandmother. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because when you download some stuff from the cloud, some of it is not even yours. So when a similar situation occurs, it may seem as though you're overreacting because you're feeling it exponentially, if that makes sense. I think you guys can see this now. And if you're saying, Mamuna, what you talking about? I gave you guys some books. They're just a few, but one of the breakthrough books is It Didn't Start With You. Another one breakthrough book that goes into this is Many Lives, Many Masters. And it talks about passing on trauma from one generation to the next and accessing it, right? So unknowingly, only because he is in that. So when he's conceived, he, the mother now, all of the emotions. So on top of all of that, when you're in vitro, all of the stress, all of the thoughts, it's like a chemical cocktail. All of the stress, the cortisol, the dopamine, the mother is on a high. All of those very highs and lows that you see with Tupac, right? In vitro, in the womb, he would have been hit by all of her experiences, because just like food is able to pass from the mother to the child, so are those feelings and emotions. So this is why oftentimes they say, when you're pregnant, be careful what you think, be careful what you say, be careful what you do, right? So he's having this experience vicariously. This is why you see that he ends up in the same courthouse. This is what the movie was good at doing. They were good at showing you the parallels that he actually came out and did some of the very same things. But while in the womb, you don't necessarily have the capacity to process that. You're getting used to and addicted to whatever those hormones and chemicals that your mother is creating within her body. So if your mother is in a high stress, this is why they talk about crack babies being born addicted to crack. But dopamine and cortisol are also a type of drug. This is why you can have people who are addicts addicted to thrill. They're addicted to adrenaline. They're addicted to whatever that drug is that is produced within your body, which is a chemical or a hormone. So all that she's going through, he's experiencing it in one way or another. So when she's 5 months pregnant, and also there's a level of fear, as a person, I'm a Capricorn. His mother's born one day after me. I'm born the 9th, she's born the 10th. So I could almost speak on the mentality of when you're born in this space, right? You don't know. They say, yo, she was really calm. Because you don't show all of that on the surface. You understand? That's just not how we roll. You ain't going to be coming out here breaking down looking all crazy. That's just not, other people may, but historically, Caps don't necessarily roll like that, right? So what she's feeling internally, you may not necessarily see. So when she goes to jail and is having these very intense experiences, I say all that to say he's having these very intense experiences in vitro. Okay. So he may come out looking like a perfectly normal baby. Why is Fat Joe on the screen? Not so Fat Joe. Not so Fat Joe. I'm glad, you're looking healthier. When he comes out, why is it not showing the thing? When he comes out, he looks like a normal, healthy baby. But inside, it's kind of like throwing your gauges off, right? Throwing your internal system off. And so things that trigger you may not trigger other people. There's something that spoke about people who are exposed to high levels of stress in the womb. Uh, coming out crazy Aries all day. Aries is hot in the head, man. Sometimes, right? But you may be, if you're exposed to high stress in the womb, you may be develop ADHD. You know what I'm saying? There's all of these studies about what type of personality. Remember what I just said, because this is a composite, including what's in the cloud, including what happened in vitro. All of this stuff. By the time you're born, your luggage is overweight. You're coming with a whole lot. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. I did this study because when I was in vitro, my mother was exposed to stress, right? And so I had many questions, not as wild as his, but I'm like, what in the world? You know what I'm saying? What in the world? You start to think, what's going on with me? So you start, if you're like me, I start to research because I want to know, you know what I mean? But it is what it is. Some people had very calm gestations, right? There wasn't all of that other rah rah. But to those who were exposed to certain things, then you're going to see a different type of person that is not necessarily, is no injury to the person on the surface. So you're not going to see anything particularly wrong until you go beneath the surface. Okay, so let's read a little bit of this article. There were several important male figures in Tupac's life. One of the reoccurring themes of him crying out, his father, his father, his father. So again, that is something that spoke to the forefront of his mind. And because many people weren't able to get a handle on him, they missed the window of opportunity to teach him the discipline that he needed. Because I'm not all the way deep into astrology, but when you're born, it's just like when a plant, the nature of a plant. The nature of a pepper plant is hot and the nature of lettuce is cool, right? So it's not no mysticism. It's the nature of that thing, or the nature of when something, the nature of fall crops are a certain thing, and the nature of summer crops or something else. So the nature of when you're born is just what it is, okay? And so this type of individual needed a they needed the balance, because if you just came too militant, there is another side of these Geminis, because I don't know why, but I happen to know someone, again, that is born 2 days in the same exact year, okay? 1971, 2 days after Tupac. So that type of personality, I know intimately, okay? And I'm saying that this type of personality, in addition to all the things they downloaded in the cloud, just the personality alone needed a mother and father balance, because they operate more so energetically in this duality. That's why people say he was soft, he was hard. They be all of that. 1 minute and then the next minute. I'm telling you, the same exact year, 2 days apart. Very interesting stuff. So I go on to say, let's continue. I've been doing this study for a minute. Okay. A member of the Jersey branch of the Black Panther Party in 1960s. So that's what I said, right? That's what it says here. That's what it said there. Bill Garland, or William Garland, his actually name is, because his father was also named William, met Afeni at a strategy officer meeting in New York City in 1969. The two had a short affair in 1970, which led to the birth of Tupac in June 16th, 1971. So, being that he's born in June, this short affair would have to have been, because this is the kind of stuff I do when you give me dates, right? With children, it's kind of like, okay, if they're born on this time, this is kind of how it's going to go. So if you gave me the date of June 16th, this means that the person had to be conceived in September of 1970. Okay. Now when you look at when she was released, I do stuff like, when was she released from jail? Because according to the story, he was the driver. So this strategy officer meeting had something to do with how they are going to, this probably was when Lumumba was still out, because I have to check when they actually went into jail, right? Because she's out in 1969. So again, that to clarify how he meets her. Does he meet her when he's with Lumumba? Because then to certain degrees, when you see a man with another powerful woman, then having access, he says it was free love. That's what he says. I wasn't there, but that's what they said. But when you now have access to the woman of the person who was in power, then vicariously you are empowered. Am I wrong or am I bugging? Right? This is the same reason, and why you see things repeat itself is that the controversy between when Tupac, oh snap, if I say oh snap during this, is because as I talk through it, I see more dots, right? It's like connect the dot. When Tupac called Faith Evans to, where was that? The studio. And they say Mary J. Blige went, I forget where they were. And then he makes a song about it. It was to indicate that I have power over you, right? Because I have access to your woman. Now, this younger guy, he would have been younger than the older people, but the access that he accessed, even though they said that she was with somebody else at another time, but his access, being somebody in the party, I don't know if the other person was in the party, right? His access to the leader's woman would indicate that some of that power was transferred to him. Does that make sense? Now, Billy, this is me just ascertaining some information. I'm not coming for nobody. But based on how politics and power works, yeah, this is interesting. Okay. Now, I don't know who made what move or what, I don't know. But I'm just saying it's similar thing happened when Tupac wanted to, whether he did or he didn't, he wanted to get a message across to Biggie. He invites the woman and then acts as if, or whether he did or he didn't, that he was with the woman. Interesting stuff. Okay. History does repeat itself. Okay. Now, whether he knew that was what happened with his mother and father, we don't know the full story. Only they know. Let's continue reading. It says here, the two had a short affair. So it doesn't say, he's telling the story here. So we don't see anything about him being a driver. He didn't see anything about him moving her back and forth. We don't see anything about that. It says here, and then he was born. While Afeni was in jail, and then it says while she was in jail for conspiracies to blow up New York department stores and subway police stations. Was he born when she was in jail, or when was he born when she came out of jail? Like that transition for me. Okay. Living separately but around the family for his son's early childhood, Garland fell out of touch in the mid-70s and stayed that way until Pac was recovering from being shot at New York's Quad Studio in 1994. So the acquittal, right? When were they acquitted? Because timeline is important. Sometimes we forget because we're older, and sometimes we inadvertently leave out details because we do. Timeline is important. Wait. Sometimes we wait. Let me know if this is the deep enough dive for you. Shout out to everybody who's listening. Let me know if this is a deep enough dive for you. When did the New York 21 get This is another thing I use. It's timelines. There. Timelines are very important when putting together your own family history. I'm just in here doing this because it's public and we have a lot of information and data to be able to see how something like this works. I'm not a trained genealogist, but I gets down. You know what I'm saying? So the acquittal of the Black Panther members was May the 12th, 1971, of 156 charges. So she argued the case, and all of it came back not guilty. He's born in June, right? So the way that this transition on this here, will you stop? The way that this article transition is incorrect. Two had a short affair. That part we don't know. We wasn't there. Which led to the birth of Tupac. That part we do know. June, while Afeni was in jail for conspiracies to blow up. That part misleads it. Like I was like, when I read this article, I was like, what did he do? Go to jail and see her? Like that didn't make any sense. But we know she was already out of jail when Tupac was born. because she comes out, they're acquitted in May of that year, and he's born like a month later. It may seem like a small detail, but it shows that the way this conversation is going, it may be a few missing details here. Hold on. Let me put my tea down. Uh-oh. All right, so let's continue here. It says a member of the Jersey. Okay, we already read it. Living separately because they were never in a relationship. Now, I'm gonna read her book, but there's a possibility that now that she's pregnant and they don't have a relationship, and according to him, she may have felt away because he might have felt like she didn't want to acknowledge him when Tupac grew older. But around the family for his son's early childhood, Garland fell out of touch in the mid 70s and stayed that way until Pac was recovering from being shot in New York Quiet Studios. Now, according to the father, his friend told him, "Hey, I think I seen your son in the movie, which is Juice." The father says he went to the movie, he saw his son, and he was like, "Wow, okay." According to him, after that, he tried because Juice came out what 91. By the way, Juice was one of my all-time favorite movies. But once again, I did not like the way Tupac acted. I mean, the movie was his part was riveting because remember, this is real time. Like we are all going through this real time. You understand? But I remember feeling like Bishop is wild in the movie. I remember that. I leaned towards Omar's character. But when Tupac first came out with Brenda Got a Baby, I remember that coming on BET and watching that black and white video. So all of the whole way in which I'm a spectator, like many of you who are listening, we watched the whole thing unfold, right? And it definitely spiraled out of hand, but you can also see why. You can also see why. Let me see here. So basically here, this is what the father says. What was your relationship like? I don't like most people are familiar with the relationship you have. It says, I know. It used to bother me, but it doesn't. Because there's one thing he told me, and that's he loved me. And I knew him up until he was 5. Remember, I told you about this 5-6-year-old trauma in their family history of losing a parent. You understand what I'm saying? This is the 3rd generation where, according to him, he was there. And then by the age of 5, something happens, whether someone dies or somebody goes away or somebody leaves you with somebody else. His granny, him, and now Tupac are all having this trauma at the age of 5 or 6. I don't know how you do it. It's the dots, man. You got to put the dots. You can't conclude first. You can't be like all emotionally involved in the storyline so that you're not able to see it for what it is, right? He says here, because there's one thing he told me. Okay, wait. So the father's also looking for solace to a certain degree, but I'm not going to get into that. I knew him up until he was 5. I got married to another woman. This is when we got out of the Panther Party. So he says it explicitly here. In today's interviews, he's not saying it explicitly, but here he's saying he got out. So those people who went his own way, she is 10 toes in, right? And he's like, nah, it's a no, it's a dub. He gets out. She already has abandonment issues. She has daddy wounds. And one thing I forgot to mention that I was like, that was messed up in the trial. How she ends up taken back to jail at 5 months pregnant, according to the narrative, is that the men who she was also fighting to exonerate decided to skip out, and they broke the terms of agreement for their bond, and she ends up getting taken back to jail. So they don't show up to court. They skip out. So she has betrayal issues. She has trust issues. She has daddy wounds, all of that. Okay. And now she's pregnant for someone who she's not in a relationship, but this is the first time that you come to term, right? And you are trying to make it work with other people. And this particular person marries somebody else. She may not have, I don't know if she did or didn't, expressed the way she felt, but she kind of had to feel a kind of way. So he says, I got married to another woman. This is when we got out of the Panther Party. Me and Afeni, that's where we met. So this is later on. He's like, so basically, she was from there, and I'm on to other things, and therefore, the block was hot. Basically, people were getting taken out. People were going. The block was hot, and he didn't want anything to do with it. So he says we lost contact with one another. There's no doubt in my mind that I could have been a better father. And then he says he has to bear the burden because there was something I could have said or have done, maybe that might have led to the path that his father has led to. So he has to bear the burden, and that he does. Right? He's and then the first time he meets up with him again is when he's shot, which is interesting because according to the father's narrative, when his mother, if I don't know if the mother got the abortion at home, because the way he said it is that if he knew 911, then he would have called to save his mother's life. So it's interesting that at 5 years old, 6 years old, he loses his mother in a sudden compromising situation where she's bleeding out because there's twins and one baby dies and the other baby, and then she's bleeding out, right? And whether he was there, that would be a question to ask him. And then when he sees his son 15 years later, is around in the same similar circumstance where you're helpless, so to say, that this person that is in a compromised situation and you can't do anything about it. So the father himself is also being re-injured. He has the guilt of he wish he could have did something more for his mother. He has the guilt of he wish he could have did something more for his son. Right? And again, he's younger. His father is in the community. His mother had died, and he already has his reasons for why he did what he did. And here we are. So, what was I gonna say? Move forward. So not as to make this is a deep dive, but moving forward from that, the young man is mirroring not only his mother's life, he's mirroring his father's life and his grandmother's life. And this is why I think that more so the father's lineage is where I don't want to say original sin, but where the intergenerational trauma of what we saw the timeline that he was on come from. Because I'll say this for me, when I was doing the research, there was a major piece of the puzzle that was missing. I had my father's side, I have his mother, his father, I had my mother's side, but I didn't have my mother's father's side. And it is when I got that side, and that was the last piece to come into the puzzle, I realized that the timeline of events, that is coming from a certain place. Because trying to figure this out is like having a draft in your house and you trying to figure out where it's coming from. Is it this window? Is it the roof? Is it the back door? So when you have 4 directions, paternal, maternal, mother, father, if you're experiencing something that's aversive, you're experiencing something that you can't explain, it's not necessarily coming from all sides, although it may feel like it. What happens is it's coming from one side, and that energy then attracts the mother, attracts the father to allow you to have that experience again. But the original situation usually is coming from one space. That's what I found. Queen T says she loved deep dives. Queen T, I had to get it off. Y'all had me. I was over there watching 5 episodes. That joint was long. I'm kind of tired too. I got to go lay this book out. But I haven't, let me not get off track because y'all know how I do when I get off track too. But yeah, I love it too as well. So I said, let me get this off my mind real quick. Well, the phone stopped ringing. So, where were we? So yeah, so the father is giving his insight. I could drop this now. The father is giving insight to why he may not have felt loved, why he may not have felt like he had guidance and protection. One of the time he said he felt like his mother cared more about the movement than he did his children. That's the mother's void. That's the mother's wound. She was looking for, based on, if anybody overindulges, anybody, and they care more about the outside appearance and helping others more than your own, that's a void that you're trying to fill. You're doing it more out of, and this has been my experience, out of a need to be accepted, appreciated, valued, and you value the opinions and acceptance and appreciation of those outside more than you do inside. And then sometimes in those situations, you may see those inside neglected while the needs of others are met. And when you do that, it creates a deficit. The people on the inside pay so that the people on the outside. So basically, you're pouring from an empty cup in hopes that they will pour back into you. But in this particular work, because you're kind of taking to make sure that the other people have, they don't really have what you need to pour into you. So when you go home, you're depleted. We saw that in Malcolm X situation where at one point in the Malcolm X movie, of course, Betty Shakur has to tell him, what about us? You feel me? You keep telling me the people, the people, the people. What about your family? What about what's going on here? And a lot of leaders, they tend to fall into this space because there's something else that's pushing. In addition to wanting to help the people, there's something that you need from the people. There's some type of acceptance. There's some type of thing that you're looking for that it's not the normal payoff. So the person who's looking at it like they don't even want any money. That's not the payoff. You see what I'm saying? They do it from the no, it's not always when it creates damage on the other side, it cannot be fully altruistic because it interrupts the natural pattern of give and receive. You understand what I'm saying? The natural universal laws of creation, when they're interrupted, then somebody else is suffering. And if somebody is suffering, then the natural laws are not in full operation. So the fact that her family, and those like them had to suffer for the whole community, and then at the end, the community wasn't able to meet their needs, that showed you that the whole situation was off. Right? And this is what made those people, the children of the revolutionaries, disenchanted with their reality. On the surface, on the foundation, they were drilled, they were taught, they were indoctrinated with what the organization wanted them to know. But because your base needs were not being met, food, clothing, shelter, love, right? Security, those base needs that were not being met, you were willing to, and he was willing to compromise. When I saw in this video, when he wanted to go on the road because he was hungry and he wanted food and his mother was in a compromised situation, as a child of the movement, to be willing to put on Speedos and do the Humpty dance, you must know that that created conflict. Because on one hand, they're talking, and he said this oftentimes in interviews, they're talking the revolution, but they're poor. And then the person has to make a choice. They already have been poor, impoverished, and they don't want that. So now, if the people want, he's going to try to find a way. And oftentimes people born during this time, they try to do that. They try to take the ideal that's in their head, and bend the rules, kind of manipulate the environment to kind of not make it look like they have deviated from their core principles, but also appeal to people in a way that is going to get them their desired result. I know it sounds wild, but trust me, I've seen it. I told you, I've seen it. And as a person born at different times, you look at it very differently. Like, nah, there is no wavering. And then people will be like, no, you're wilding, because the way you're coming at it, the way you're approaching it is like, no, 100%. There is no wavering. I don't care what you say. My ear is ringing. If y'all watching and y'all enjoying, please put the thumbs up, the like button. I don't say that enough. But so that more people can share. I think the obsession with Tupac, the obsession with the storyline, and still not coming out with the moral of the story is a tragedy, because even in his being here, he kept feeling and saying that you didn't understand. The people didn't understand. They gravitated to the part of him that they can hold on to. And the more it's like here in social media. I do videos. If I want to do comedy, I could do comedy. When I do the comedy videos, they get hundreds of thousands or thousands of views across different platforms, right? But all the time I ask myself, do I want to do comedy because I feel in a comedic mood and I want to do comedy? Or the people want this? So I have to now I have to not, it's no longer authentic. I have to keep showing up only in the way that the people desire to see me. Otherwise, else, I'm only going to get 100 views. But I'm January. So if 100 views it is, 100 views it is. Because the reality is that's when you start becoming torn. Because you now cannot authentically be who you are. You have to be this limited aspect of who you are because the people cannot and as a creative, because I'm a creative, as a creative, that robs you, right? And people don't understand it. Like if it's working on social media, this is why you see some of the social media, one of the big social media guys, I think his name was what was his name? He used to be all over social media giving all kind of inspirational quotes, and I don't know if you remember him. And then all of a sudden I seen him like in yoga pants, like meditating somewhere, like, yo, that's not real life, man. I needed to take a break. Why? Because now you feel pressured to continue to show up for people in a way that you haven't even been able to show up for yourself. That's problematic. But that's from the pressures of the world. But let me continue. Let me see how long this deep dive is going. That is deep, boy. Let me see something here. If it's deep, let me know. What time is it? Hold on. We're running on an hour. Okay, so essentially, that's the part that I wanted to cover. A lot of the other parts have been talked about over and over and over and over and over again. The part that I wanted to cover and rediscover is the part about the missing piece that he even passed. According to the narrative, he said when he woke up, he saw a man that looked like him standing over him. It says here, I thought my father was dead all my life. After he got shot, he looked up. There was, he says, a ninja that looked just like me, and he was my father. And that's when I found out. We still did not take a blood test, but the ninja looked just like me, and the other ninja's dead. So now I feel that I'm past the father stage. Look at this. This is him trying to make a concession for realizing that someone lied to him for a very long time, right? And he doesn't have the time because there's so much going on with him. He does not have the time to unpack it. Even when he's having that interview with Tabitha from MTV, he's trying to skate past certain things because something like this is so heavy that you have to have time to unpack it. And because so much is going on in his life, he doesn't have time to unpack it. That's like saying, I don't even care what's in that box. I'll get to that later. So he says, so now I feel that I'm past the father stage. You're never past the father stage. You're past the stage where you needed him as a young boy, but a father is a father. You need them through all stages of your life. It says, I do want to know him, and I do know him. We did talk, and he did visit and help me when I was locked up, but I'm past that. Why does he keep saying that? Again, because the one person who he did have, which was his mother, coming to terms with the fact that somebody misled you, which is your mother, even though she wasn't fully present at all times, leads you in a deeper abyss. And you're laid up being shot, questioning your reality. Where are you? What's going on? And this is not necessarily the best time to go a digging. You understand? So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Like I said, I got to go lay out this book. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Let me know your thoughts in the description below. When you're doing this, I'll leave you with this. Actually, check the link out below. I do help people um, limitedly because, well, just check the link out if you have questions about what's going on in your own space, right? But there was something I was going to say and I forgot. Oh, dots. Connecting dots is very important. Don't overlook it as just a coincidence, right? A lot of times these behaviors, they resurface and they recycle, and it may not be your immediate parent. Your parent may have become your parents because your parents were going to be the conduits for which this uh, experience, they were at the level that this experience, that you could become into this experience. Now somebody will say, like he often said, he thought he was cursed from birth. He said this often, right? And people be like, well, why do you keep saying that? Whatever, again, whatever he was feeling, it was compounded, it was exponential, right? And you see it through the way in which he vacillates all throughout. It was exponential. And again, I would submit to the viewing audience that it was coming down. It was like, it didn't just start. It was like a train barreling down the track. And because his grandmother is the one who got, according to his father, the abortion, then it's crazy to say, but the blood would have had to been on the hands of the person and the people who did the act, for whatever the reason is. And so much deep dive. And I'll say this one more thing. Me with my enough self, no. I said, well, let me go do a time period piece. I don't know why I wasted my time. This is why I'm tired. Watch this movie, because I looked it up and it was like, oh, there's this new movie that came out in 2022 called Jane on Hulu, right? So after I finished watching this, I knew that the abortions were illegal, and I knew that they had underground abortion clinics, right? Because I think it was in one of the movies, Women of Brewster Play. It was in one of those movies, right? So the fact that the grandmother dies during one of these illegal procedures, I wanted to kind of do a little research time period piece. But why did this movie have this? It was basically a European woman who was married to a lawyer. This is crazy. She's married to a lawyer. She has one daughter. Now she wants to get, it's illegal, but she wants to get, the doctor told her she has a tubal pregnancy and that she wants to get an abortion, but the people at the hospital said nah. So she decides that she's going to seek and do it for her. She's going to find a way to get it done. So she stumbles upon this underground clinics. She gets a reference or she sees something, she calls them, and then she gets it done and gets sucked into this underground world of offering abortions. And then she finds out that the doctor, quote unquote, is not a doctor. Okay. All the time she's lying to her husband, telling him she's going to art class. She's learning to be an impromptu abortionist. I mean, I'm like, what kind of movie is this? And then she blackmails the guy into teaching her how to perform these quote unquote procedures. They have one melanated woman in the movie who they were charging at that time $600 for these abortions. And she had one melanated woman who's saying that it's disproportionately European women that's getting it and that they should subsidize it so that black women can get it too. And I'm sitting here like, what am I watching? Right? So ultimately, she gets taught how to do it, and then she teaches everybody, like she was teaching them how to cut hair or something. And then the husband finds out, and then the women get busted, and then the husband defends them. And then I'm like, and then Roe versus Wade is passed. I'm like, is this a true base story? Because if it was black people, I think this would have went a totally different way. But anyway, that movie, I watched it so you don't have to, because that movie was wild. But I kind of wanted to see, I thought it was going to give me more insight on what the grandmother could have been experiencing. And again, it could have been She was overwhelmed. It could have been economically driven. What I lean towards economically driven, because then that's a reoccurring theme in Tupac and his mother's life, a lack of resources. So usually when I see these repeating themes, I lean towards that. That could have been the impetus for her uh, wanting to have an abortion. Okay, let me read these comments and then I'm a dip. Do you think the right environment could have fed him spiritually and led him down the right path? I do. And that's another part of the spirituality, because they were more community based. The spiritual element cannot be undermined, right? I didn't hear more about the spiritual element, because the spiritual element would have given an insight to understand why this situation exists. And I do think that had he, because like I said, June people, especially this time, they need structure, and they need structure from early on. But if they get too much structure and too much militancy, then they're going to tend to lean away, because they need a balance of the free space and the structure. Like it exists, both of those things exist simultaneously. So when he was supposed to be coming out of prison, according to his godfathers and his uncles, they were arranging for him to come out of prison. According to what they were saying, but he needed to comply. He needed to stop with the foolishness, and he needed to get on the straight and narrow, because remember, he had the militancy. And according to what he said, Tupac decided he doesn't want to do that. He wants to make his own way. And therefore, he's going to go with death row as opposed to go with them, because according to them, he only had like 5-6 more months to serve. But that sitting down, that discipline that he needed to exhibit in that time, he did not. Because also remember that the mother he was in vitro when she was in jail. So whatever thoughts that she was thinking while in jail could be like, I got to get out of here. This is whatever thoughts she was thinking in jail, that being in jail again may have triggered him in a way that he would do anything to get out. Also remember that his godmother is Asada Shakur, and the way they got her out is they broke her out, right? So in his mind, he's living in the next generation of these Panthers, and Asada may have been broken out, but here comes someone to get him out on his terms. But we see that didn't happen. But again, in life we have choices. Anything can change. If the wrong environment led him down this path, then the right environment. And when I say right environment, it's not just the theoretics of what we need as a people, but the things that you need as a human. So the right environment, the stability that he needed, the love that he needed in that time and space when he was growing up to 14, 0 to 7 to 14, that could have made a world of difference. If his father was present and took him to live with him while his mother got herself together, that could have made a world of difference, because he has brothers who are still here. The father had 6 children, including Tupac. 2, he says, died, which is very similar to the grandmother, because she would have had 6 children and 2 died. The father had 6, Tupac and his sister died, and the sons are there. So the fact that the father wasn't there, I think that was the turning point. I think most definitely. And the mother, from what I'm seeing, she overcompensated. And then it came a time where she overcompensated, and she was trying to do what she needed to do, or felt that she needed to do, for the quote unquote people. Queen T said, I definitely agree with all and see it all around with me and others. Yeah. As long as we could take this into our everyday lives, then a win is a win. A win is a win. I got the young children to eat carrots. A win is a win. At this time right now, a win is a win, man. You know what I mean? So if we can see this and start to connect our own dots, you know what I mean, and find some relief. The problem is, for me, the sad part, there are many sad parts, but he wasn't able to find, the soul was not able to elevate in the way that it needed to, not intellectually, right? Because there's a lot of people, this world, intellect, don't get me wrong, it's very important. But intellect doesn't take you to the top floor. Meaning that spiritual connection with the divine, which is source, which is what we come from, is what gives us that peace. And I'm not just talking about what you could get in church or what, I'm talking about when you connect to the creator, that very source energy, and have that peace. Intellect cannot take you there. It doesn't go all the way to the top floor. So when people were enamored by his intellect and also bewildered by his lack of discipline and his discipline and all of the like they said, the contradictory behavior, he wove himself into a corner that he was not able to get out of, because of what you probably didn't see when the cameras went off. What you didn't see or what you didn't hear is what was plaguing him, right? And one of the times, and he's saying that him leaving here is when he can finally find peace. So, it's a sad story. Stop fetishizing the dude, man. It's crazy. The way people idolize and fetishize people is mad. I mean, it's crazy. Everything is here for our learning and edification. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. People still over here like, yeah, remember it was two shoes. And I'm like, broski. Can we stop man worshiping? With that said, everybody have a blessed day. Thank you for tuning in. And leave your comments and thoughts in the box below. Now this thing is not going on. And shout out to everybody who told the story. And once again, Mr. Garland, I meant no disrespect. That's just some of my observations. And if I said anything that was not within what was said, or if I took something out of context, feel free to let me know, and then I can revisit that as well. And for those who did the documentary, shout out to you. The aunt who did the documentary, shout out to you. And then we're going to come back and talk about this poly situation, because what was that? What was the poly about, fam? What was the poly about? All right, everybody, one.